The park bench felt harder than usual that afternoon. Michael sat there, staring at nothing in particular, his $1,000 suit wrinkled from hours of sitting in the same position. His tie hung loose around his neck, and his expensive leather shoes were covered in dust from the walking path. He didn't care anymore. Just this morning, everything had fallen apart. The company he'd built from scratch, the one he'd poured 15 years of his life into, was gone. His own board of directors had voted him out. They said he'd become too aggressive, too focused on profits, too difficult to work with. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd sacrificed everything to make that company successful, and in the end, it had cost him everything. His phone buzzed in his pocket for the 100th time. More messages he didn't want to read. More calls from people who yesterday called him a genius and today probably called him a failure. He'd turned it on silent hours ago, but he could still feel it vibrating against his leg like a constant reminder of the life he'd lost. 2 weeks ago, his father had passed away. Michael had been in Hong Kong closing a deal when it happened. He'd made it back for the funeral, but barely. Even then, he'd spent half the reception on conference calls. His father's last words to him had been during a brief hospital visit 3 months earlier. "Slow down, son. None of this matters if you're alone at the end." Michael had nodded, promised to visit more often, and then gotten on a plane to Seattle for another merger meeting. This morning, his wife of 12 years had handed him divorce papers over breakfast. She hadn't yelled or cried. She just looked tired. "I can't compete with your ambition anymore," she'd said quietly. "I don't think I ever could." He'd wanted to argue, to tell her he'd change, but the words felt hollow even before he could speak them. She was right. He'd chosen board meetings over anniversaries, late nights at the office over date nights, business trips over family vacations. Somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten what he was working so hard for. Now he sat on this bench wondering if any of it had been real. The success, the respect, the power. It had all disappeared so fast. Like waking up from a dream and realizing none of it existed in the first place. "Hey, mister, why do you look so sad?" The small voice startled him. Michael looked down to find a little girl standing in front of him, maybe 5 or 6 years old. She had chocolate ice cream smeared on her chin and wore a bright yellow dress with a cartoon character he didn't recognize. Her hair was pulled back in 2 messy ponytails and she was missing one of her front teeth. Michael quickly wiped his eyes, not realizing until that moment that he'd been crying. "Oh, I'm fine, sweetheart. Just thinking about stuff." The little girl tilted her head, studying him with the kind of intense focus only children seem capable of. "You don't look fine. You look really, really sad. Like when my goldfish died sad." Despite everything, Michael felt a small smile tug at his lips. "I'm okay. Shouldn't you get back to your parents?" They might be worried, but the girl didn't move. Instead, she climbed up onto the bench beside him without asking permission. She sat cross-legged, still holding her ice cream cone, completely unbothered by the fact that she was talking to a complete stranger. "My mommy says that when people are sad, they shouldn't be alone. Being alone makes the sad grow bigger." She said this with absolute certainty, as if she was sharing a fundamental truth of the universe. Michael didn't know how to respond. When was the last time someone had shown him simple, uncomplicated kindness? When was the last time someone had cared if he was sad without wanting something in return? "That's very wise of your mommy," he managed to say. The little girl nodded enthusiastically, sending her ponytails bouncing. "She's the smartest person in the whole world. She's an artist. She paints pictures that make people happy." She paused, taking a lick of her ice cream. "Do you want to meet her? I bet she could make you feel better. She's really good at that." Michael glanced around the park, looking for whoever was responsible for this precocious child. "I don't think that's a good idea. Your mom probably doesn't want her daughter bringing home random strangers from the park. But you're not random. You're sad. That's different." The girl's logic was simple but somehow made perfect sense. She hopped down from the bench and grabbed his hand with her free one. Her fingers were sticky from the ice cream, but her grip was surprisingly strong. "Come on. She's right over there by the big tree. She won't mind. She never minds when I make new friends." Michael knew he should say no. He should politely decline, make sure the girl got back to her mother safely, and return to his bench and his misery. But something in the child's earnest expression, in her absolute confidence that her mother could fix everything, made him hesitate. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the fact that he'd spent the entire day alone with his thoughts and desperately needed a distraction. Or maybe it was something deeper, Something about this little girl's unshakable belief that kindness was the answer to sadness that spoke to a part of him he'd forgotten existed. "Okay," he heard himself say. "I'll meet your mom." The girl's face lit up like he'd just given her the best present in the world. "Really? Yay! Come on, come on." She tugged on his hand, and Michael found himself being led across the grass toward a large oak tree on the far side of the park. As they walked, or rather as the girl skipped and Michael stumbled along behind her, she chattered away. "My name's Lily, by the way. What's yours? Do you like ice cream? This is chocolate, but tomorrow I'm gonna get strawberry. Do you work in an office? You look like you work in an office. My mommy works at home mostly, but sometimes she works at the gallery. That's where people buy her paintings." Michael answered her questions automatically, his mind still processing the surreal turn his afternoon had taken. 20 minutes ago, he'd been contemplating the ruins of his life. Now he was being dragged across a park by a 6-year-old with ice cream on her face, who thought her mother could solve all his problems. Under the oak tree, he could see a woman sitting on a blanket surrounded by art supplies. She was facing away from them, completely absorbed in whatever she was painting. An easel stood in front of her, and even from this distance, Michael could see the explosion of colors on her canvas. As they got closer, Lily called out, "Mommy! Mommy, I found someone who needs help." The woman turned around, and Michael's first thought was that she looked nothing like what he'd expected. She was younger than he'd imagined, maybe early 30s, with paint-stained fingers and her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She wore simple jeans and an oversized shirt covered in colorful splotches, but it was her eyes that caught him. They were kind, genuinely kind in a way that made Michael's carefully constructed walls begin to crack. "Lily," the woman said, her voice a mixture of amusement and mild concern. "What have I told you about bringing home strangers?" Michael opened his mouth to apologize, to explain, to make a graceful exit. But before he could speak, Lily squeezed his hand tighter and said with absolute conviction, "But Mommy, he's really, really sad. The kind of sad that needs fixing, and you're the best at fixing sad. You fixed me after Daddy went to heaven, remember?" The woman's expression softened, and when her eyes met Michael's, he saw understanding there, not pity but recognition, as if she knew exactly what it felt like to have everything fall apart. "Well then," she said gently, gesturing to the blanket, "I guess you'd better sit down. I'm Rachel, and you've already met my daughter, the most persistent child in the state. Would you like some lemonade? Fair warning, it's store-bought, not homemade, but it's cold." And somehow impossibly Michael found himself nodding. He sank down onto the edge of the blanket, his expensive suit looking absurdly out of place among the paint tubes and coloring books. Rachel poured him a cup of lemonade in a plastic cup decorated with cartoon animals, and Lily plopped down beside him, still working on her ice cream cone. For the first time all day, Michael felt like he could breathe. He didn't know these people. They didn't know about his failed company or his divorce or any of the ways he'd messed up his life. To them, he was just a sad man on a park bench, and somehow that was exactly what he needed to be. Rachel watched the strangers settle onto their picnic blanket, and every maternal instinct in her body went on high alert. Her daughter had just dragged home a man in an expensive suit who looked like he'd been through a war. His eyes were red and puffy, his shoulders slumped forward like he was carrying an invisible weight, and there was something about the way he held himself that screamed exhaustion. But there was also something else, something in his expression that she recognized all too well. It was the look of someone who'd lost everything and didn't know how to find their way back. She'd seen that look in her own mirror 3 years ago, right after her husband died. "I'm really sorry about this," Michael said, his voice rough. "Your daughter is very persuasive. I should probably go and let you enjoy your afternoon." He started to stand, but Lily grabbed his sleeve. "No, you just got here." "You haven't even tried the lemonade yet. Mommy makes the best lemonade in the world." Rachel couldn't help but smile. "I really don't. I buy it from the grocery store and pour it into a pitcher. But Lily believes in my lemonade-making abilities, so who am I to argue?" She met Michael's eyes. "You don't have to go. Honestly, if Lily thinks you need to be here, there's probably a good reason. She has this weird sixth sense about people." Michael hesitated, clearly torn between politeness and whatever had driven him to that park bench in the first place. Finally, he sank back down. "Just for a few minutes. I don't want to intrude on your time together." "You're not intruding," Rachel said simply. She went back to her painting, mixing colors on her palette. "We come here every Thursday afternoon. It's our thing. I paint, Lily colors or plays, and we watch the sunset. It's peaceful. Lily had already lost interest in the adults' conversation and had pulled out her coloring book. She sprawled on her stomach next to Michael, her legs kicking in the air as she carefully colored what looked like a dinosaur wearing a tutu. "This is Princess Rexy," she announced to no one in particular. "She's a T-Rex who loves ballet." Michael found himself watching the child color with an intensity that surprised him. When was the last time he'd just sat and watched something simple? When was the last time he'd been anywhere without his phone buzzing, without thinking about his next meeting, without constantly planning 3 steps ahead? Rachel noticed his stillness. "You look like you've had a rough day." It wasn't a question, just a gentle observation. Michael let out a long breath. "You could say that. More like a rough year that all came crashing down today." She didn't push, didn't ask for details. She just nodded and kept painting. Those days are the worst. When everything decides to fall apart at once, like the universe has a sense of timing and really terrible humor. That's exactly what it feels like, Michael said, surprised by how much he wanted to talk to this stranger. Like someone up there decided today was the day to collect on every mistake I've ever made. Lily looked up from her coloring. "My daddy died when I was 3. Mommy says that was the worst day ever. But then we had good days again. It just took a while." The matter-of-fact way she said it made Michael's throat tighten. Rachel's hand paused on her paintbrush for just a moment before continuing. "Lily's right. My husband had cancer. By the time they found it, it was too late. He was gone 6 months later." "I'm so sorry," Michael said, and he meant it. His problem suddenly felt smaller in comparison. Rachel shook her head. "Don't do that. Don't compare pain. Loss is loss, whether it's a person or a dream or the life you thought you'd have. It all hurts." They sat in silence for a while. Michael sipped his lemonade and watched Rachel paint. She was working on a sunset scene, but it wasn't realistic. The colors were exaggerated, bold, almost wild. Purples and oranges and pinks that didn't exist in nature, but somehow captured the feeling of watching the day end better than any photograph could. "That's beautiful," he said quietly. Rachel glanced at her work critically. "It's for a client who wants something for their daughter's nursery. They wanted hopeful. I'm trying to capture that feeling when the sun sets, but you know it's coming back tomorrow." "Do you make a living doing this? Painting, I mean?" She laughed, but it wasn't bitter. "Barely. I do commissions, sell pieces at a local gallery, and work part-time at that same gallery doing whatever they need. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills mostly." She wiped her brush on a rag. "What about you? What do you do? Or did you do if today was as bad as it sounds?" Michael wasn't sure why he told her. Maybe it was because she was a stranger and he'd never see her again. Maybe it was because Lily was humming while she colored and the sound was oddly soothing. Or maybe he was just tired of holding it all inside. "I was a CEO. Built a tech company from nothing, grew it into something worth millions. This morning my own board voted me out. Hostile takeover they'd been planning for months, apparently. I was so focused on the next deal, the next acquisition, that I never saw it coming." He paused. "My wife also filed for divorce this morning, and my father died 2 weeks ago while I was overseas closing a business deal." Lily had stopped coloring and was staring at him with wide eyes. "That's a lot of sad things all at once." "Yeah, kiddo, it really is." Rachel set down her paintbrush and turned to face him fully. "Can I ask you something? And you don't have to answer if you don't want to." Michael nodded. "Do you miss the company? The job itself, I mean. Not the success or the money or the status. Do you miss actually doing the work?" The question caught him off guard. He opened his mouth to say yes automatically, then stopped. Did he miss it? He thought about the last few years. The endless meetings that could have been emails. The constant pressure to grow faster, earn more, beat the competition. The politics and the backstabbing and the sleepless nights worrying about stock prices. "No," he said slowly, surprised by his own answer. "I don't think I do. I think I missed it a long time ago and just didn't notice. Somewhere along the way, it stopped being about building something I believed in and started being about winning, just winning for the sake of winning." "That sounds exhausting," Rachel said softly. "It was. It is. I don't even know who I am without it." Michael laughed, but it sounded hollow. "I'm 38 years old and I have no idea what I'm supposed to do with my life now." Lily abandoned her coloring book and crawled over to sit next to him. Without warning, she leaned against his arm. "You could come have picnics with us. We come every Thursday. You could be our friend." The simple offer made something crack in Michael's chest. When was the last time someone had wanted to be his friend? Not his business partner, not his networking contact, not someone who wanted something from him. Just his friend. Lily, Rachel said gently. I'm sure Michael has other things to do on Thursday afternoons. But Michael found himself shaking his head. Actually, I really don't. He looked at Rachel. Would that be okay? If I came back next week? I promise I'm not some creep. I could use somewhere to go. Someone to talk to who doesn't know CEO Michael or billionaire Michael or any version of me except sad guy on a park bench Michael. Rachel studied him for a long moment. He could see her weighing the risk, thinking about her daughter's safety, wondering if this was a terrible idea. Finally, she smiled. Next Thursday. Same time, same place. Bring your own lemonade, though. I wasn't kidding about mine being store-bought. I can do that, Michael said, and for the first time all day he felt something other than despair. It wasn't quite hope, not yet. But it was something. They sat together as the sun began to set, painting the sky in those impossible colors Rachel had captured on her canvas. Lily went back to her coloring, occasionally showing her work to both adults and demanding their opinions on her color choices. Rachel painted, and Michael just sat, letting himself be present in a moment that asked nothing of him except to exist. As the light started to fade, Rachel began packing up her supplies. We should head home soon. It's almost Lily's dinner time. Michael stood brushing grass off his expensive pants. Thank you, both of you. I know this was weird, but thank you. Lily jumped up and without warning hugged his legs. See you next Thursday, sad mister. But maybe you'll be happy, mister, by then. He reached down and gently patted her head. Maybe I will be, kid. As he walked back to his car, Michael pulled out his phone. The screen showed 47 missed calls and over 100 text messages. He stared at them for a long moment, then did something he'd never done before. He turned the phone completely off and put it in his pocket. For the first time in 15 years, the silence didn't scare him. Because now he knew that next Thursday he had somewhere to go. He had a little girl who saw him as just another person who needed a friend, and a woman who understood what it meant to lose everything and somehow keep going. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And right now, a start was exactly what he needed. That night in his empty hotel room, Michael didn't check his email or look at the news articles about his ousting. Instead, he sat by the window and watched the city lights flicker on one by one. And he thought about a little girl who believed her mother could fix sadness, and a woman who painted hope in colors that didn't exist in nature. Maybe they were right. Maybe hope was something you had to create yourself in whatever colors you could find. And maybe, just maybe, he could learn how to do that too. Thursday couldn't come fast enough. The next Thursday couldn't arrive fast enough for Michael. He spent the week in a strange limbo, dealing with lawyers about the company buyout, signing divorce papers, and fielding calls from reporters who wanted the inside story of his spectacular fall. Everyone wanted something from him. Answers, explanations, drama. But all he could think about was getting back to that park. When Thursday afternoon finally came, he showed up 30 minutes early. He'd stopped at a fancy grocery store and bought the most expensive lemonade they had, along with fresh cookies from the bakery section. As he sat on the bench where Lily had first found him, he felt ridiculous. Here he was, a former CEO worth millions, excited about a picnic with a single mom and her kid. But it didn't feel ridiculous. It felt like the first real thing he'd done in years. You came back. Lily's voice rang out across the park. She was running toward him, her backpack bouncing, Rachel walking more slowly behind her with the art supplies. Mommy said you would, but I wasn't totally sure. Sometimes grown-ups say they'll do things and then they don't. Michael felt a pang in his chest at that. Well, I'm here. And I brought lemonade and cookies. Lily's eyes went wide. Cookies, what kind? Chocolate chip and oatmeal raisin. I didn't know which you'd like, so I got both. I like both. Lily grabbed his hand like they were old friends. Come on, we have the best spot today. There's no bird poop under the tree. Rachel caught up to them, slightly out of breath. Sorry, someone insisted on running the whole way from the car. She gave Michael a warm smile that made him feel genuinely welcome. I'm glad you came. Lily talked about you all week. I had to tell her 3 times that Thursday comes after Wednesday. They settled onto the blanket, and this time Michael felt less like an intruder. He helped Rachel set up her easel while Lily immediately dug into the cookies. The afternoon sun was warm, And for the first time in a week, Michael wasn't thinking about what he'd lost. He was just there, present in the moment. "So how was your week?" Rachel asked as she squeezed paint onto her palette. "That's probably a loaded question given what you told us last time." Michael laughed dryly. "It was a nightmare. Lawyers, reporters, people from my old company trying to get me to sign non-disclosure agreements. My soon-to-be ex-wife's lawyer called me 17 times. I stopped answering after the 5th call." "That sounds awful," Rachel said simply. She didn't offer advice or try to fix anything. She just listened. "The weird part is I kept thinking about what you said, about whether I actually missed the work." Michael picked at the grass. "I realized I don't miss any of it. The meetings, the stress, the constant pressure. I thought that's what I wanted, but I think I was just running. Moving so fast I didn't have to think about whether I was actually happy." Lily looked up from her cookie. "Are you happy now?" Leave it to a 6-year-old to ask the only question that mattered. Michael considered it. "No, not yet, but I'm not as sad." "Does that count?" "That counts," Lily said seriously. "Mommy says happiness comes in little pieces. You have to collect them like puzzle pieces until you have enough to see the whole picture." Rachel smiled at her daughter. "I did say that, didn't I? Smart girl." Over the next hour they fell into an easy rhythm. Rachel painted while explaining her process to Michael, who found himself genuinely fascinated. She was working on a commission for a children's hospital, a series of paintings meant to make kids feel less scared. "I try to paint things that feel safe," she explained. "Animals that look friendly, colors that feel warm. When my husband was sick, I spent a lot of time in hospitals. They can be scary places, especially for kids. I wanted to make something that helps." "That's really beautiful," Michael said. "Using your art to help people like that." Rachel shrugged, but he could tell she was pleased. "We all help in different ways. You built a company that employed hundreds of people. That matters too." "Did it, though?" Michael heard the bitterness in his own voice. "I built something so focused on profit that I forgot about the people. My employees probably celebrated when I got voted out." "Maybe some did," Rachel said honestly, "but I bet some didn't. I bet there are people whose lives are better because you gave them jobs, opportunities, chances they wouldn't have had otherwise. You can't throw away all the good just because it ended badly." Her words settled over him like a blanket. He'd been so focused on his failures that he'd forgotten there had been successes too. Years of them. People he'd mentored, products they'd created that actually helped users, innovations that moved the industry forward. Lily interrupted his thoughts by climbing into his lap, something she did as naturally as breathing. "Want to see what I drew?" She showed him a picture of 3 stick figures under a tree. "This is me, this is Mommy, and this is you. We're having a picnic and everyone is smiling." Michael stared at the simple drawing and his throat got tight. "Can I keep this?" "Really? You want to keep my drawing?" Lily's face lit up like he'd offered her the world. "Really? I'll put it somewhere special." As the afternoon wore on, something shifted. They talked about real things. Rachel told him about the struggle of raising a daughter alone, of juggling bills and art commissions and trying to be enough for a child who deserved everything. Michael talked about his father, about how he'd been too busy to visit during those final months, about regrets that felt like stones in his stomach. "You can't change the past," Rachel said gently. "Trust me, I've tried. After Daniel died, I spent months thinking about all the things I should have said, should have done. It ate me alive. Finally, a friend told me something that helped. She said the past is where we learn, not where we live." "The past is where we learn, not where we live," Michael repeated. "I like that. What would you do differently?" Rachel asked. "If you could start over, knowing what you know now, what would you change?" It was a good question. Michael thought about it while watching Lily chase a butterfly across the grass. "I'd focus on people more. On connections. I spent so much time building an empire that I forgot to build a life. I'd do something that actually matters to someone other than shareholders." "Like what?" "I don't know yet. But something real, something that helps people like your paintings do." Rachel smiled. "You'll figure it out. And you have time. That's the thing about losing everything. Suddenly you have all this space to rebuild exactly the way you want." They stayed until the sun began to set, just like the week before. But this time, when Michael got up to leave, Lily hugged him goodbye like it was the most natural thing in the world. Rachel gave him her phone number just in case he needed to talk between Thursdays. As Michael walked to his car, he felt different. lighter somehow. For the first time since everything fell apart, he felt like maybe this wasn't an ending. Maybe it was just the start of something new. That night he did something he hadn't done in 20 years. He got out a notebook and started writing. Not a business plan or a strategy document, just thoughts, ideas, dreams he'd buried under ambition and forgot existed. What if he did something that actually helped people? What if he used his experience, his connections, his resources to build something that mattered? Not for profit, not for prestige, but because it was the right thing to do. The idea was still forming, still vague and undefined. But it was there. A seed of possibility. He taped Lily's drawing to the wall of his hotel room. 3 stick figures under a tree, all of them smiling. It was the only decoration in the sterile space, but it made the room feel less empty. The next few weeks followed the same pattern. Every Thursday, Michael showed up at the park. Sometimes he brought art supplies for Lily. Sometimes he brought dinner so Rachel didn't have to cook after their picnic. They talked about everything and nothing. Rachel shared her struggles with making rent, and Michael helped her price her commissions better. He shared his confusion about what to do next, and she listened without judgment. Slowly, piece by piece, Michael started to rebuild. Not his old life, that was gone and he didn't want it back, but something new, something better. He started volunteering at the local community center, teaching business classes to people trying to start their own companies. He reached out to former employees he'd mentored and apologized for being so hard on them. Some accepted the apology, some didn't. He learned to be okay with that, and every Thursday he went to the park. Because somewhere between Lily's laughter and Rachel's quiet wisdom, and the simple act of watching the sunset with people who cared about him, not for what he'd accomplished but for who he was, Michael had found something he didn't even know he'd been missing. He'd found a reason to keep going. And more importantly, he'd found people worth going forward for. One Thursday evening, as they were packing up, Rachel said something that would change everything. "I heard about a nonprofit that's struggling. They provide art programs for underprivileged kids, but they're about to lose their funding. It made me sad thinking about all those kids who won't get to experience what art can do." Michael stopped folding the blanket. "Tell me more about this nonprofit." Rachel looked at him curiously. "Why, do you know something about nonprofits?" "No," Michael said slowly, an idea forming. "But I know about business. And I know about turning struggling organizations around. And maybe, just maybe, I know what I'm supposed to do next." For the first time since his world fell apart, Michael felt something that looked a lot like hope. Michael spent the entire weekend researching the nonprofit Rachel had mentioned. It was called Arts for Tomorrow, and she was right. They were in trouble. Their funding had been cut, their director had quit, and they were 3 months away from shutting down completely. They'd been serving over 200 kids a year, providing free art classes, music lessons, and creative programs to children who couldn't afford them otherwise. By Monday morning, he'd made a decision. He put on one of his suits for the first time in weeks and drove to their small office in a run-down strip mall. The receptionist looked surprised when he walked in. "Can I help you?" she asked, eyeing his expensive clothes with confusion. "I'd like to speak with whoever's in charge. I'm interested in discussing the organization's future." 20 minutes later, he was sitting across from Patricia, the interim director, who looked exhausted and overwhelmed. She was in her 60s, a former art teacher who'd come out of retirement to try to save the program. "I'll be honest with you, Mr. Chen," she said, getting his name wrong, but he didn't correct her. "We're dying. Unless we find a new director and significant funding in the next 3 months, we're done. These kids will lose the only creative outlet most of them have." Michael leaned forward. "What if I told you I could help? I have experience turning around failing organizations. I have connections to potential donors, and I have time." Patricia looked skeptical. "Why would someone like you want to help a struggling nonprofit? What's in it for you?" It was a fair question. Michael thought about how to answer. "I spent 20 years building a company that made a lot of money but didn't actually help anyone. I want to build something different this time, something that matters." "That's a nice speech," Patricia said, not unkindly. "But this isn't a business. These are kids. Kids who've been let down by adults their whole lives. They don't need another person who's going to promise big things and then disappear when it gets hard." "You're right," Michael said. "They don't. Which is why I'm not asking you to trust me yet. Let me volunteer for a month. No pay, no title. Let me see what you do, learn how it works, and then we can talk about whether I can actually help. Patricia studied him for a long moment. 1 month. But the second I think you're here for the wrong reasons, you're out. These kids deserve better than to be someone's redemption project. Michael nodded, feeling properly humbled. Fair enough. That Thursday, he showed up to the park bursting with news. Before he could even sit down, he was telling Rachel everything about arts for tomorrow, about Patricia's skepticism, about the kids who needed help. Slow down, Rachel laughed. I can barely keep up with you. Lily tugged on his sleeve. Are you going to help the kids do art? Like what Mommy does with me. I'm going to try, kiddo. But first I have to learn how. I don't know the first thing about teaching art to children. Rachel set down her paintbrush, her expression thoughtful. This is really what you want to do? Not just guilt or trying to fix your old life by building something new? Michael sat down on the blanket, considering the question seriously. I think it started that way. When you mentioned it, my first instinct was to solve a problem, to fix something broken. That's what I'm good at. But then I met Patricia and she called me out on exactly that. She asked what was in it for me. And what is in it for you? Rachel asked gently. Honestly? I don't know yet. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. He looked at Lily, who was already coloring in her notebook. I spent my whole life chasing success and lost everything that mattered. These kids at Arts for Tomorrow, they don't have much. But they have something I never had. Adults who care enough to teach them that creativity matters, that making something beautiful is valuable even if it doesn't make money. Rachel was quiet for a moment. You know, if you're serious about this, you're going to need people who actually know how to teach art. People who understand how creativity helps kids process their lives, build confidence, find their voice. I know. Patricia mentioned they used to have 5 teaching artists on staff. Now they have one and she's part-time. Michael ran his hand through his hair. I have no idea how to recruit art teachers or design a curriculum or any of it. I can handle the business side, the fundraising, the organization, the operations. But the actual program? I'm lost. Rachel picked up her brush again, but she wasn't painting. She was thinking, what if you had someone who could do that part? Someone who understands art education and working with kids? Michael looked at her, hope stirring in his chest. Do you know someone? Maybe. Rachel met his eyes. Me, I could do it. I've been teaching Lily and kids in the neighborhood for years. I understand how art can help children express things they can't put into words. It's part of what got me through losing Daniel, creating programs that helped other kids process their own losses and fears and dreams. Rachel, I couldn't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. She set down her brush. I've been doing commission work and part-time gallery hours for 3 years, barely making rent. I love painting, but what I really love is watching kids discover they can create something from nothing. If Arts for Tomorrow needs someone to design curriculum and programs, I can do that. I want to do that. Lily stopped coloring and looked up. Does this mean we get to help the kids together? All 3 of us? Michael and Rachel looked at each other and something shifted between them. This wasn't just about him finding purpose anymore. This was about building something together, about taking their Thursday afternoon friendship and turning it into something that could help dozens of kids. Yeah, kiddo, Michael said softly. All 3 of us. The next month was a whirlwind. Michael spent his mornings at Arts for Tomorrow, learning everything he could. He sat in on the one remaining art class, watching how the teacher connected with kids who'd seen too much hardship too young. He reviewed their finances and nearly had a heart attack at how disorganized they were. He met with the board of directors, a group of well-meaning volunteers who had no idea how to save a sinking ship. In the afternoons, he met with Rachel. They'd sit in coffee shops or at her kitchen table while Lily did homework and they'd plan. Rachel sketched out curriculum ideas, painting classes that taught color theory through emotion, sculpture projects that helped kids build confidence, collaborative murals that created community. Michael worked on the business plan, reaching out to his old contacts for donations. Some people hung up on him. Others surprised him by writing checks. Slowly, painfully, they started to build something real. Patricia watched it all with cautious approval. You're actually serious about this, she said one afternoon, sounding surprised. I am, Michael confirmed. And I want to make you an offer. Stay on as education advisor. We need your experience, your knowledge of these kids and this community. I can handle the business operations, but this program needs people like you who've been in the trenches. Patricia's eyes got misty. You know I was ready to just let this place die? I was so tired of fighting. But you and Rachel, you've given me hope that maybe we can actually save this thing. 6 weeks after that conversation in the park, Michael stood before the Arts for Tomorrow Board of Directors with a presentation he'd worked on for days. Rachel sat beside him, her portfolio of curriculum designs ready. We're proposing a complete restructuring, Michael began. New leadership, expanded programming, and a sustainable funding model that doesn't rely on a single grant source. We have commitments for 60% of our first-year budget and a plan to reach full funding within 6 months. Rachel took over, showing them the new curriculum. We're not just teaching kids to paint or draw. We're teaching them to see themselves as creators, as people whose voices and visions matter. Art becomes a tool for processing trauma, building community, and developing skills they can use in any career. The board members looked impressed but skeptical. The chairwoman, an older woman named Helen, spoke up. This all sounds wonderful, but who's going to run this operation? We need a director, and frankly, we can't afford to pay much. Michael took a deep breath. This was the moment he'd been building toward. I'll do it. I'll be the executive director. I don't need the salary. I have enough money from selling my stake in my old company. Pay me whatever the budget allows and put the rest into programs. And I'll be director of programs, Rachel added. I need the salary, but I'm willing to start at whatever you can afford and build from there. Helen looked between them, then at the rest of the board. You two barely know each other. You're proposing to run this organization together. How do we know this partnership will work? Rachel smiled. We met 2 months ago when my daughter dragged him to our picnic because she thought he needed help. Since then, we've shown up for each other every single week. We've planned this entire program together, and we both care about these kids more than we care about our egos or our comfort. That's how we know it'll work. The board voted. It was unanimous. Michael Chen, former tech CEO, was now the executive director of a struggling nonprofit making $30,000 a year. And Rachel Williams, struggling artist and single mom, was creating art curriculum for kids who needed it most. After the meeting, standing in the parking lot as the sun set, Michael turned to Rachel. Are we crazy? This is insane, right? Completely insane, Rachel agreed, laughing. We barely know each other. We have no idea if this will work. We might fail spectacularly. But we might not, Michael said. But we might not, Rachel echoed. Lily, who'd been sitting in Rachel's car during the meeting, came running over. Did you get the job? Are we going to help the kids? Michael picked her up and spun her around. We got the job, kiddo. We're really going to do this. As they stood there in that parking lot, the three of them, Michael realized something. 2 months ago, he'd lost everything and thought his life was over. Now he had less money, no prestigious title, and no idea if this would work. But he had purpose. He had people who believed in him. And for the first time in 20 years, he was building something that mattered more than profit margins. Thursday picnics had turned into a partnership. And that partnership was about to change a lot of lives, starting with their own. 1 year. That's how long it had been since Lily found Michael sitting alone on that park bench, looking like his world had ended, and in a way it had. But what came after was something he never could have imagined. The grand opening of the renovated Arts for Tomorrow Center was today, and Michael stood in the main studio surrounded by chaos. Kids were everywhere, laughing and running and getting paint on absolutely everything. Parents milled around looking at the transformed space with wonder. The old strip mall office was gone, replaced by a bright modern building with 4 studios, a performance space, and walls covered in murals created by the kids themselves. Michael adjusted his tie nervously. He hadn't worn a suit in months, preferring jeans and t-shirts for the hands-on work of running a nonprofit. But today was special. Today they were showing the community what they'd built together. You look like you're going to throw up, Rachel said, appearing at his elbow. She wore a paint-splattered dress that somehow looked elegant on her. Her hair finally tamed into something resembling professional. There are 200 people here. What if I mess up the speech? Rachel laughed. You've pitched to billionaire investors and you're nervous about talking to parents and kids? That was different. That was business. This is... He gestured around at the room full of children, some of whom he now knew by name, knew their stories, knew their dreams. This matters. Hey! Rachel touched his arm gently. You've got this. Just speak from the heart. That's all anyone wants to hear. Before Michael could respond, Lily came barreling through the crowd, dragging 2 other kids behind her. At 7 now, she'd appointed herself the unofficial welcome committee for every new student. Michael, Rachel, this is Tommy and Jessica. They're new and they're scared, but I told them there's nothing to be scared of here, right? Michael crouched down to the kids' level. Tommy couldn't have been more than 8, with a cast on his arm and a black eye that spoke of a hard life. Jessica was younger, maybe 5, hiding behind Tommy like he was her shield. Lily's absolutely right, Michael said softly. This is a safe place. You can paint whatever you want, make whatever you imagine, and nobody's going to tell you it's wrong. Sound good? Tommy nodded slowly. Jessica peeked out from behind him, curious. Come on, Lily said, taking charge. I'll show you where we keep the good markers, the ones that smell like fruit. As the kids ran off, Rachel shook her head fondly. Your daughter has adopted this entire program as her personal kingdom. Our daughter is a force of nature, Michael said, then stopped, realizing what he'd said. I mean your daughter. Sorry, but Rachel was smiling. It's okay. She basically has 2 parents now, even if we keep telling people we're just business partners. The moment hung between them, full of things unsaid. Over the past year, their partnership had deepened into something neither of them quite knew how to name. They spent almost every day together, building the program, solving problems, celebrating victories. Lily called Michael whenever she had news to share. He showed up for school plays and parent-teacher conferences. They had dinner together more nights than not, but they'd never talked about what they were to each other beyond co-workers and friends. Both too scared to risk what they'd built by wanting more. Patricia's voice over the microphone saved them from the awkward moment. Everyone, please gather in the main studio. We're about to begin. The crowd moved toward the largest room where a stage had been set up. Michael and Rachel followed, slipping into their professional roles like comfortable clothes. They'd practiced this 100 times, knowing exactly when to speak and when to let the other take over. Patricia started the program with a welcome, then introduced Michael. As he walked to the microphone, he caught sight of some familiar faces in the crowd. Former employees from his old company who'd donated, his ex-wife, surprisingly, sitting in the back with a supportive smile. His mother, who'd flown in from across the country. And there, in the front row, Lily sat between her mother and Patricia, giving him 2 thumbs up. A year ago, Michael began, his voice steadier than he expected. I was sitting on a bench in the park thinking my life was over. I'd lost my company, my marriage, and my sense of who I was. I thought success meant money and power and status. I was wrong. He paused, looking around the room. Then a little girl came up to me and asked why I was sad. She didn't know who I was or what I'd lost. She just saw someone who needed help, and she offered me the one thing I'd been missing for years, genuine human connection. Lily beamed at him from the front row. That little girl and her mother taught me what actually matters. Not quarterly earnings or stock prices. People, community, creating something that makes the world better for someone else. Michael gestured to the walls around them. This center exists because I learned that lesson. Because I found people who believed in building something meaningful. He called Rachel to the stage. She came up beside him and he handed her the microphone. When Michael first showed up at our Thursday picnic, Rachel said, my daughter had dragged him there because she has this superpower. She sees when people are hurting and she wants to fix it. I almost sent him away because I was scared. Scared of letting a stranger into our life. Scared of taking chances. Her voice got softer. Losing my husband taught me that life is fragile and unpredictable. For a long time, I played it safe. I didn't dream big. I just survived. But Michael showed up and he kept showing up, week after week, even when this program was just an idea. He believed we could build something important, and he made me believe it too. Together, they talked about the program they'd created, art classes for kids who couldn't afford supplies, music lessons, theater workshops, a place where children from difficult backgrounds could express themselves safely, build confidence, and dream bigger than their circumstances. Then they brought up the kids. 5 students who'd been with them from the beginning, including Tommy, the boy with the black eye who Lily had befriended an hour earlier. He'd been coming to classes for 6 months now, and the change in him was remarkable. Tommy stood at the microphone, nervous but determined. Before I came here, I didn't think I was good at anything. I got in fights a lot. I was angry all the time. Then Miss Rachel taught me to paint and Mr. Michael told me about how he used to be angry too. Michael felt his throat tighten. He remembered that conversation. Tommy breaking down in the studio one day admitting he hated himself. Michael had shared his own story. How success hadn't made him happy. How he'd been running from pain his whole life. How art and people and purpose had saved him. Now when I'm angry, Tommy continued, I paint. And it helps. This place helps. You guys saved my life. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. As Tommy walked back to his seat, the crowd erupted in applause. The formal program ended and people scattered to explore the studios. Michael found himself standing alone for a moment, watching kids and parents discover what they'd built. A little girl was trying pottery for the first time, her hands covered in clay, laughing as the wheel spun. A teenage boy was playing piano in the music room, lost in the notes. Groups of children collaborated on a massive floor mural, arguing good-naturedly about color choices. This was success. Real success. Not money or status, but lives changed. Kids who now had a safe place to express themselves. Parents who watched their children grow confident and creative. A community coming together around something beautiful. Rachel appeared beside him holding 2 cups of punch. We did it, she said softly. We actually did it. We did, Michael agreed. Thank you, Rachel. For taking a chance on the sad guy your daughter found in the park. For believing this could work. First, he stopped, not sure how to put into words everything she'd given him. For what? She prompted, turning to face him. For giving me a reason to rebuild. Not just the career stuff, but everything. You and Lily, you gave me back my life. Rachel set down her punch cup. Michael, I need to tell you something. This past year, working with you, building this together, it's been the best year of my life since Daniel died. And I think it's been about more than just the nonprofit for a while now. His heart hammered in his chest. Rachel, wait, let me finish. She took a breath. I'm scared. Scared of losing someone again. Scared of messing up what we have. But I'm more scared of looking back in 10 years and regretting that I was too afraid to tell you that I love you. The noise of the crowd faded away. Michael cupped her face in his hands. I love you too. I have for months. I just didn't know how to say it without risking everything. So what do we do now? Rachel asked, smiling through tears. Now? Michael pulled her close. Now we stop being scared. We already took the biggest risk by building this place together. Everything else is easy. Are you guys gonna kiss? Lily's voice broke the moment. She stood there with her arms crossed, trying to look disgusted but failing to hide her smile. Because if you are, everyone's watching. Michael looked around and realized she was right. Half the room was staring at them, grinning. Yeah, kiddo, he said, looking at Rachel. I think we are. When he kissed her, the room erupted in applause and cheers. Lily made exaggerated gagging noises but then ran over to hug both of their legs. Later that evening, after the crowd had gone and the building was quiet, the 3 of them sat in the main studio.